Happy Saturday and welcome to the Marketing Madmen. Nick Constantino here live from the Battery, and we got a suite mate with us. We got a guest who also resides in the Battery and also a guest who's going to be starting a show on this very station. So I would like to introduce Mr. Scott Johnson of the Warrior Alliance. Scott, how are you, sir?
Great, Nick. Thank you so much for having us here. We're really excited about our partnership with Dickey Broadcasting.
Yeah, we're very happy to have you. We also brought along Ed Kennedy, our national sales director, a sales guy, a manager, our affiliate director, a jack of all trades here at Dickey Broadcasting Company, and also the proud father of a West Point student. So we got an Army guy in here. So Ed, how you doing, bud?
I'm doing great, Nick. Thank you for having me on the show as well.
Pleasure to have you. So I think what I'd like to do is frame this conversation. We're going to be talking about the Warrior Alliance. We're going to talk about kind of the sad state and how we got here with veterans and veteran affairs and the military. But before we do that, Scott, why don't you introduce yourself, talk about your experience in the corporate world and what brought you to this point, because that'll frame how we talk about the Warrior Alliance, some of the great things that you guys are doing.
Sure. And I really hope this resonates with a lot of people that are civilians and did not serve in the military. My father served in the Navy in World War II. My brother was in Vietnam in the Air Force. And back about the time I was leaving school, it wasn't real popular to join the military. It was post-Vietnam. And I just went straight off to college and didn't think twice about the military. I joke with people, I did my tour of duty out in Silicon Valley, and it's more dangerous out there actually than some deployments, I think. But spent a good long 3 decades in corporate America, running management consulting and as well as IT related work. Was in a startup software company years ago, and at the end of all that, I looked back on that career like many people do, and what is the great gain coming out of a corporate career? I joke with people I'm a recovering corporate executive, and but I had a calling right towards probably my 3rd decade in my career, and that calling came in an unusual way.
So you're set up, we're set up, we have a corporate world, so I'm sure there's millions of things, even if you're doing work now, that you picked up that you learned from being in that structure, in that environment. One, probably the pace of change. I remember Silicon Valley in 2004, I had graduated college and I moved out west, and I was working for a tech startup called Divix, and they were in San Diego, but they were a lot of affiliation with Google. And I mean, the pace of change, and it's even sped up, but how quickly things are changing and how quickly, you know, IT, it used to be every 20 years you need new equipment. You probably need every 3 years new equipment now, just because of the pace of change. So I think that sped you up. So you're in the corporate world. You felt like most people that you're working. What are you working towards? What is the greater good? So you had the calling. So am I allowed to ask what the calling was?
Yeah, and I'll build up to that.
This guy's a pro here.
Well,
this guy's a pro here.
The reason, because you said something that's extremely important. The work that we do at the Warrior Alliance is extremely complex, but the veteran doesn't care about how you're running your business, what process you're following, what technology you use. They don't care. All they want is finding a pathway to get to success after military service.
Yep. No different than the consumer doesn't care why the steak is $80. They just want a steak that's affordable. They don't know the nuance. They're never going to learn the nuance unless you're in the space. So I think it's an important thing to distinguish. You're right. Like, how it gets from A to B is irrelevant to most people, but how it gets from A to B is the only way this works.
Right.
And we've forgotten about that part.
Right.
And it gets more complicated and convoluted by the year.
So I either had the sentence or the luxury of working with Fortune 500 companies that had global footprints. And I would work on mergers and acquisitions. I would work on technology buildups and outsourcing. I would take thousands of employees that worked at different companies and rebadge them and then put in all new business process and optimization, new technology.
So complex is an understatement.
Complex is an understatement. And working on process improvement, startup of a new software company, watching it fail, watching it grow, watching us purchase new companies and doing mergers. When you're working in all those dynamics and you think about the complexities of working with diverse communities from all over the globe. When I came into starting up this company, the Warrior Alliance, I had already been through 3 decades of startups, watching Fortune 500 companies make bad decisions when they had all the details in front of them. And then
usually out of hubris, I imagine. That's usually the word. It's that ego and that hubris is usually what gets in your way.
I have stories about Sears and Kmart that would bore the audience, but what you learn
for the younger audience, Sears and Kmart.
You weren't, but you said 2000. You said 2004. I think the merger took place back then. But those life experiences, you have the maturity when you're going into building something. The number one thing that you have to think about, no matter if you're working in the airline industry or the oil industry or the banking industry, whatever it is, at the end of the day, when you ask a CEO what does success look like, it's you got to wow the customer. You have to find a way to deliver streamlined and effective processes so at the end of the day, that consumer is experiencing something with your product or service that brings you competitive advantage, but takes that consumer to the next level.
And I think you brought up a great point, and I think ultimately what for me and most people, what does that next level is finding a easy solution to a problem. Ultimately, everything we have is a problem, whether we eat, we drink, what we have, everything. If you are in the business of customer service, you are finding problems that exist and the best path to have solutions for them. That's corporate America. It doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter if you're in the nonprofit sector. We are taking problems that exist or should exist or will exist and finding solutions for them.
That's right.
That's what it is. So customer service, you care more if something is done efficiently than if it's done fancily. Right?
Correct.
You want to get to the root of your problem, get something that solves it consistently and in the best way possible.
Right. And I'll get to the calling. Didn't you ask me about the calling?
Yeah, we go in rabbit holes all the time.
Yeah, well,
I'm surprised that hasn't chimed in yet to make it more confusing.
Well, he will. Not make it more confusing, but chime in. But to that point, when I was asked to start the Warrior Alliance, and then I'll get back to how I got to that point, but when I was asked to look at this, the continuum of care of a veteran, when people look at a veteran and you see them on TV and all the commercials, or you hear the media, there's been a brainwashing of the civilian population as to, when I think of a veteran, I think of homelessness, I think of post-traumatic stress, I think of people I have to worry about, or they're always looking for a handout. And there's this reputation that has been built up over time. And then I look at, so that's an issue. Because it's just the opposite.
Yeah.
Veterans are actually the ones looking out in your neighborhood when you're on vacation.
Yeah.
They're watching the cars in the neighborhood to see who's coming near your home that shouldn't be there. And I could go on about the CEOs and all that.
Sure.
But the other thing is that not only have they been portrayed a certain way, but they are bringing a level of discipline, skills, and excellence into our communities that if we're looking for healing in this nation, I always tell people if I were to start up a company today from scratch, I would hire 7 veterans to take on that task than experienced people coming out of the civilian world. And there's a whole thing behind that. But when I looked at the veteran problem, because there's a lot of solutions looking for a problem, there's 43,000 nationally registered nonprofits that are trying to help veterans. Wow. We've spent billions and billions and billions of dollars in the last 2.5 decades trying to solve veteran issues. Why is suicide going up? And I just look at stuff like that and I'm like, there's got to be a solution. It is so fragmented.
Yeah.
Just by the fact that a veteran, once a military service member leaves the gates, or as General Cardin calls it up at the National Guard, the wire. Once they get past the wire and they step outside, they lose their network, they lose their home, they lose their purpose. And we throw them out there and we give them, thank you for your service, and we give them slices of things they need to get their life put together, but it's not a continuum that helps them find their career path or their life path to succeed. We abandon them.
Yeah.
And I want to paint a really negative picture, but that's the problem.
Yeah. And I agree. And I think in my experience, one of the things about being in radio is mass media. That's how the masses think of veterans. But if you've been in the business and you've hired veterans, one, it's a different pitch, right? Yep. You have to understand the regimen, and that this is a regimen, and you have to give purpose. And they look at you as the leader to give some of those things.
That's right.
Which is really hard to understand at first. But once you do, you change your dynamics. And I also think that I want to go into this a little bit more, because I think this is something that really started in the Vietnam era. And there's lots of history behind how we got to this point. But one of the things I've observed is government helping doesn't usually help. And when I say that, most people will hire veterans because the government gives you benefits for hiring veterans. They give you credits and benefits for hiring somebody. So as opposed to, let me hire this veteran because they have come in with this skill set, let me adapt our policies to work best with this. It's, oh my God, this is a tax write-off. I almost benefit twice by having this person. And I've seen that side in action too. Those things are not there to help. I understand what the intention is, but it's not always good intentions that lead us to the right places.
And I didn't mean to interrupt, but, and I know this is a marketing show, so marketing people may not like what I have to say.
Uh-oh.
Stop saying we're veteran friendly.
Yeah.
Because that is offensive to a veteran.
Yeah.
What companies have done, and believe me, veterans who are companies that have claimed to be veteran friendly, because that became a phrase, the initial intent of it was very powerful, because veteran unemployment, when that started probably 2 decades ago, was 3.5 times the civilian population. Now it's below 3%. So companies that took the oath to start hiring veterans made a huge dent and helped veterans. But at some point in time, they use veteran friendly as a marketing moniker. And veterans see that. Mm-hmm. So you got to be very careful. If you're saying you're veteran friendly, you better back it up with more than that.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think there's a lot of things we can apply that to. When we come back from break, we're going to continue this conversation, really frame how we got here, and then talk about what the Warrior Alliance is doing to make sure that these vets are taken care of. You've been listening to the Marketing Madman on Extra 106.3, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to the Marketing Madman on Extra 106.3. We have Scott Johnson of the Warrior Alliance, Ed Kennedy from 6A The Fan, Dickey Broadcasting, Braves Radio Network. So, Scott, we've set this audience up. They're eagerly anticipating the aha moment. So why don't you walk us through the aha moment, and then we can, again, dig a little deeper into how we got here and what the path forward is.
Can you have more than one aha moment?
You can have as many as you want.
All right. Well, it's kind of a convoluted story, but I'll synthesize it as much as I can. Got into the sport of triathlon, was up training at Lake Lanier one day, and I met this double amputee, was not a veteran, got inspired because he was going to be the first to do the Hawaiian Ironman. Long story short, helped him get to Hawaii, helped him complete the event. He became the first in 2007 to do that event in 17 hours and 42 minutes. Don't ask me about that experience. But after that, we kind of went on a tour, wrote a book, and ended up at Walter Reed one day. And a wounded 101 Pathfinder Army sergeant, actually Master Sergeant, was there, had gotten blown up on his last tour in Afghanistan, and was looking at this athlete and going, hey, I want to do what you did. And just jokingly, because he had just gotten his prosthetics and was learning to walk, I said, we're going to go do the Boston Marathon again this year. We were in the bombing last year, and we're going back because 2014 is going to be to honor some individuals that I got to know that were injured. Why don't you come do the Boston Marathon? He showed up the day before the Boston Marathon and said, I'm going to go with you. And I'm like, how much have you run? And he had not run more than 3 miles. So for those of you from Boston, you know the story about the Citgo sign. So I told him, let's run a mile together, and we're going to stop at mile 1, and then my photographers are going to drive us down to the Citgo sign, which is about a mile from the finish line. Yeah. And dude, mile by mile, he just kept stopping and go, let's go one more. let's go one more. And he said that like 16 times. We stopped at a fire station just as you come on to Commonwealth. For those of you who know how the Boston Marathon works, it's almost downhill for 16 miles. And when you get to 16 miles, that's when the race starts, because you got to go up Heartbreak Hill and then all through Boston University, and that it's a nightmare. And Cedric said to me, I'm done. I can't run any further. Got into a fire station, got some chicken bouillon, poured it down his neck, and he popped back up and he said, let's just try to finish this thing.
Wow.
9.5 hours it took us to do the Boston Marathon. And there's a great picture of us that the AP took. I had to take his legs off 14 times because of the pounding that his bone was pushing through his skin. It felt like every time he hit the ground, it was like glass. And so that experience, and you get to know someone when you're running 9.5 hours for 26 miles, but it wasn't on it really got down to the personal level of that day, that day in Afghanistan. And I can't say that I was convicted, but little did I know, I lost several employees in the World Trade Center in the South Tower in my consulting business. That whole day affected a lot of us, but then having it kind of come to that event in the Boston Marathon with Cedric, and then we ended up doing the half Ironman down in Augusta together that HBO filmed. That was 11.5 hours. I told him I'm never doing another event with you ever. That was the worst experience, but it was on a big HBO special. And again, getting to know at that level someone to dig down because they cared so much about their brothers and sisters. Little did I know at the time, it wasn't like resonating with me that this is happening in your life because you're going to be asked to go do this service at some point in time, and I'm going to close every other door that's open to you and only open this one. Wow. And that's what happened. But I didn't know at the time in 2014 that I was being prepared for something that happened 10 years ago that now is becoming a nationwide experience.
Yeah, it's an amazing story. And I think that, one, you're right about being intimate with somebody when they're in that moment where they're in their lowest and you're there to pick each other up. And it's the same thing about the military, right? You're there as a group and you're seeing the lowest of lows. And the only way to get to the highest of highs is to be together and pull each other and push each other through these things. Yep. So I think it's metaphoric, but at the same time, it really happened. And I think that probably paved the way. I want to bring Ed in here. Ed, so your son is going to West Point. So he had to put in his tenure of service. I believe 6 years after, no matter what, pretty much, he is signing up to be in the Army. So tell us about what that was like for you, what was going through your head, and how proud of you are of him now that he is there.
Well, my son Blaze is a gymnast, and so he's been in a gym working out ever since he was basically 7 years old, perfecting his skills. And people who don't have kids in that sport don't have any concept of how much time and effort, the incremental growth that you see them make. And as he was, his dream has been to be able to be a college gymnast, and there just aren't that many options available, because of all the scholarships that go to football players. When schools had to decide which sports were going to be eliminated, unfortunately, men's gymnastics in most schools got eliminated. So there's only a handful of them left. But the Army found him. It just so happened, it's a competitive field. I mean, there's not that many spots available. But Blaze was really, really good at pommel horse, and it just so happened that Army West Point needed pommel athletes for their men's team, and they found him. And, it was interesting because, watching that kid have somebody who wanted him to be on their team, like, he just soaked it up. I mean, he was so excited. And I think, for him as an athlete, it also gave him, what do you do if you've spent your whole life being a gymnast? What do you do after that comes to an end? Yeah. And
No,
I think
he had that planned out a little bit.
the Army provided him a path and with lots of options.
I mean, if you think about as a job employer, he's going to come out with the discipline to be a gymnast, which is all of your life, dedication, repeated repetition, and then you're going to go come out with Army, with West Point, and then Army training. That's like the guy you hire, right? If he doesn't find a passion to stay in the Army, because a lot of the West Point guys, they stay, they're lifers. They're lifers in there.
Sure.
I had a best friend growing up who, unfortunately, his brother passed while he was at Army, car accident, died, and my buddy was the biggest clown on earth, similar to me. We were just complete clowns together, and he gave up his entire life to preserve his brother's legacy, so he went to West Point.
Oh, wow.
Changed overnight. A kid, if you would ask me, I thought he would have been a stand-up comedian. He now is the CEO of a tech company out of Charlotte because of West Point did to transform his life. So it's very real. I got to go up there a lot when I was in New York. We would go up to a game a year, and believe it or not, I just this past week I played golf with Jeff Munkin, who is the coach of Army, and even the football coach, the interaction with him, the integrity that he carries himself with, and the way that you see it is a reflection of that institution, and they actually just extended him. So it is a big deal, the armed services and all these parts. What was going through your head with the fact that now your kid has to go serve and all that? Were you proud of him? Were you scared? Were you nervous? What started and how you feeling now?
So it's interesting because I've known Scott now for
3 years,
3 or 4 years, for a long time, and so during the course of learning about his business and what they do, of course, I've heard a lot about the challenges that veterans have when they get out. And so, for me, I know if he has the West Point training, he's on a great path. Like, I mean,
as good as it can be.
As good as you could probably set yourself up for. But, I was concerned about what his service will end up looking like. Is he going to get deployed? Will he be in a danger zone?
And it's impossible to predict. It's impossible to predict those things. We don't know the state of war, the cyclicality of it all, what his specialty is. It's impossible to know.
So as a parent, super proud. I did not serve myself. I did consider serving. My father was a graduate from Texas A&M. He was in the Corps there. A bunch of my family has been in the Army, but
you've moved a lot. You followed that path, like the Army kid that moves a lot. So you've seen a lot of it.
Sure, but but I didn't end up serving for various reasons, and so I'm super proud of him. I'm really, really proud that he took that path. But I'm concerned. I'm worried. I worry about what will happen when the day comes that path ends for him and he comes back out.
And I think it helps us frame this. So, Scott, here's my question for you. And I don't want to, we just don't have time to go through the nuance, but my understanding was at the end of World War I and World War II, especially World War II, that these soldiers came back as global superstar heroes, that they were building houses for them. In fact, my grandmother in Queens lives in a house that they built just little houses for all the military people coming back. They just gave them houses. That's how well taken care of they were. So I understand cyclicality. I've also just read recently all about the 60s and 70s and the anti-government sentiment and the rebellious generation that started this whole path of politics that we are today. But what happened? How did we get to the point? I know Vietnam was unpopular. I get all that stuff. But how did we get to the point where these people were returning heroes and then a mere 2 decades later, they're coming back and they are looked at as pariahs and so misunderstood? What got us there? And then how has it progressed to now? And how do we get into this situation?
I don't know if I have the exact answer for it. I'll give you a theory is everything is generational, right? And once it started down the path of the DNA got set post-Vietnam that these individuals were coming back wounded and not being taken care of, the VA system that was set up for World War II could no longer handle the dynamics of the soldier, the Marine, the corpsman coming back from Vietnam. So many programs that are here today were non-existent, and people had to fight their way or not disclose that they were in the military. So I think the die got cast in the 80s. And we were in a period of non-big war during the 80s. And so people just kind of melted into their communities, and it wasn't a real big push. Here comes Desert Shield, Desert Storm, very quick, war in the Middle East that a lot of people were there that came out, and they were taken care of, but the lion's share of that reputation or that mindset of the media towards people that served in the military was still all the issues of that generation that was now turning 50 years old, 60 years old, of Vietnam veterans.
The age where it's even harder to succeed.
Right.
You come back, at least you're able-bodied. You're 50s, 60s, a lot of that PTSD is catching up with you. A lot of those physical ailments have caught up with you. It's even harder to be part of the workforce at that age.
Right. And the dynamic that was happening for the veteran at that time was you had to fight like crazy to convince the government that your illness was connected to your military service. Now,
mental health was a different world back then also. So we didn't have the science behind it. We didn't even connect the mental health to the body health and the physical health. So we were playing in a different ballgame science-wise. I think a lot of these things now are starting to come to the forefront, which I hope, Ed, by the time that Blaze is in the position where he is a veteran, some of the progress now on how we're looking at mental health differently and how we're seeing that lays the foundation for people to understand the stress and trauma. Because you have young kids, I hate to say it, that are whining and bitching about going to work as traumatic. Yeah, what about being in a freaking ditch with somebody with gunfire being at you? You see what real trauma is. Sure. So I'm hoping that a lot of that groundwork is being done. Besides what the government does, public sentiment, and I think we're always in cycles. And I think if you look at a cycle trend, you're coming to start to see the upswing, which is a good thing. But so Scott, so we're screwed up. I think we can wholeheartedly say that the groundwork has been laid for this to be pretty screwed up. You said there's 43,000 institutions that are trying to help. Talk about how the Warrior Alliance is different. Talk about what you guys do, how you approach this, and then let's talk about how you get that message out to the masses, because the work you're doing should be shared with people. But if it is just passed along as we're warrior friendly type thing, it's not going to have the impact that it deserves to.
Well, interesting. The problem that started to permeate over the 90s began to rear itself in the 2000s, right?
Yeah,
post 9/11. All of a sudden, 30% of the combat force is coming back, missing limbs. Suicide is beginning to take its toll. There's more people dying after they serve than when they served. And all of a sudden, post-traumatic stress becomes a buzzword that then becomes science. The barrier had been built. When we just take one step back, the problem is the institution of government built a barrier that said you cannot help a service member until they've left the military, meaning community, public sector versus private sector. We were forbidden, we being those 43,000 organizations that are here to bring people into our communities. We're told by the DOD, you cannot talk to service members or help service members before they leave the military. And so the wall had been built that we take care of them. We help them transition through the TAPS program, which you military people all have your opinion of TAPS, and none of it's positive.
Yeah.
That was enough. And then I began to look at this as I was researching, starting up the Warrior Alliance. How do we innovate? How do we get upstream to build something so that we're not asking permission from the military? We're not asking permission from the VA. Yeah. We're building something so incredible
that they're coming to you.
That they're coming to me. Now, that started with me and one other guy drawing this thing up on a napkin and saying, how are we going to do this? And that was 2016-ish. And so here we are, fast forward to 2024, and it's happening. And how did we do that? So I built an organization. All thanks and credit go to Mr. Bernie Marcus, who built the Marcus Foundation, and you both know what incredible impact he has had on this city. But he was giving money to multiple veteran service organizations and actually built his own mental health program, which is really taking off, called Avalon. But Bernie was giving money to all these different organizations. But the frustration that the Marcus Foundation had was, but people aren't getting better. They're going out and getting networked with other veterans, and then they go away. They go find a job, but then we lose sight of them. You know, we all have needs, the hierarchy of needs. You can't just give one thing to a veteran and go, we help the veteran, because they need multiple things. If they have a housing problem, they have a financial problem. If they have a financial problem, they might have a legal problem. And then they might have a financial literacy problem. And then they may have other issues. It's all a ripple effect. So
and it is exponential too. Once one thing comes, it starts tending to go upward, and they happen more and more and more. If you don't catch it in the early phase of it, that effect is starting to go up, and the steepness of which it goes up speeds up very quickly, which is very scary.
And what you just said, people say, what causes veteran suicide? It's the combination of all those things. It could be a phone call from an old friend who just told them something negative news. What one person said to me, it's like having a cup of water and it's just one more drop. And it could be any one of those multiple things that they go, that's it.
Yeah.
I'm done.
Yeah.
And it isn't because
of that one thing,
of a mental health problem. It's because of a phone call.
Yeah.
Or someone cut them off and hit their car after they just got it fixed. It's that last drop of water.
Straw that broke the camel's back.
Right. And that's because the underlying issues are complex and they have to be supported through a continuum of care. Bernie came to our organization, not him personally, but his people. And they had gotten to know me from a workforce development program I had built. They said, would you consider standing this thing up and connecting this ecosystem of providers that we're already supporting into a connected network so that a automatic, innovative referral system could be built so that if Nick comes to a recreation thing and starts sharing his story, that person go, oh, well, I'm just going to have you call the Warrior Alliance. They're connected to everybody else because there's no way to track them, emails, phone calls, who would call back, who wouldn't, and know who was a good qualified service provider to help that person. So bringing and streamlining, connecting, tracking, case managing, all of that was on a napkin and say, we can build the Warrior Alliance that connects all these service providers. And Mr. Marcus, this can exponentially then become a force multiplier for the dollars that you're putting into these individual organizations so that veterans are now getting holistically changed, not just one thing at a time.
Yeah, the best way that, based on what you said and what I know, my wife is in the NGO and in the community space, and what I would say is there is a difference between forcing a problem on someone and empowering them to solve the problem themselves. And the world these days, this has changed. It is not, here, the government's giving you this, fix it. It's, let me empower you to fix these things yourself. Let me plug you into a network of people. Let me empower you to make this change, right? For the longest time, we thought change was just change. That's not how it works.
Right.
If you empower someone to make change and you put them around like-minded people and they feel that, because you know what it probably has done? Probably saved a couple people, taken a couple drops out of the water to make sure that that suicide doesn't happen because they're with like-minded people. And it's not always like-minded people who serve in the same regiment, because those people are probably have the same problems they do. It's people who maybe got out earlier and regret that they didn't get out, but they can help with this. And it is that network. It's empowering. So it's a great message. And obviously we're here, we've worked, we've done what we can to help. How do you market this? How do you get people aboard to understand the good you're doing? Because this is a marketing show after all. How do these listeners find out about you, get involved with you? What's the best advice to the layman who just wants to help? Where do you point them?
Yep, great question, because, you know, we started the show out by saying a veteran doesn't care how, they just want to know. And when I got into this business, being a civilian, the number one thing I was told was no one trusts you. Telling the listening audience, if you did not serve in the military, I would probably, you know, let you in on a little secret. The military doesn't trust you. Not because you're not a good person, because the system of civilian life has failed them. When they call someone to get help and no one calls them back, or when they're told their military skills prepare them for an incredible jobs in the marketplace.
It's a marketing shtick.
It's
a commercial of the future. Yeah,
and they're told to put their resume online, someone will call you and they don't hear back. False hope is worse than no hope.
Yeah.
And that's how we've conditioned them. So help by it's marketing, right? It's building awareness. We're about ready to do our third annual Veteran Impact Awards and Gala here in the next few weeks here in May. I'm telling people, everyone calls us. We want to volunteer. We want to help veterans. The best thing that you can do is learn about the Warrior Alliance on our website, thewarrioralliance.org, thewarrioralliance.org. Don't forget the THE or it won't find it. thewarrioralliance.org. Get an understanding of the services that are out there and the 40 providers that we're connected into. Find 3 veterans, and instead of saying thank you for your service, tell them to go on our website, and if they don't need help, find somebody that does that they served with, because that's where you make the difference.
Yeah, it really is unbelievable, and I have to imagine being at the Battery and the exposure from here, and you guys have done it the right way. And just in my experiences, you guys can imagine being a community liaison, having an actual EEO license that we have to give back to the community, how many requests we get from different organizations. And Scott has been a pleasure to work with in the sense, how do we make this beneficial for each other to make it beneficial for everybody? It's not just I need, it's hey, look how this can be together. What value we can provide here. How are we connecting the dots? Because most people either start in the beginning or they start at the end. Nobody's thinking about connecting the dots. And ultimately, this world, everyone's got big ideas. Everybody can do the ground level execution. Getting it from the big idea to the ground level execution is the really hard thing in marketing, in business, in community, in charity. So when we get back, we're going to talk a little bit about the show. Proud to announce it and how this is another further extension of how we can help the Warrior Alliance. You've been listening to the Marketing Madman on Extra 106.3, and we will be right back. Welcome back to the Marketing Madman on Extra 106.3. With us today, we have Mr. Serendipity, Scott Johnson here. We got Ed Kennedy, and we were talking a little before the break of just how this show came about. So before we get ahead of ourselves, Ed, talk a little bit how you and Scott have been working on this show. Talk a little bit about why the timing was so well and why we're excited to announce the launch of this show right here on Extra 106.3.
Sure. Well, first of all, a big part of my job is I'm a radio advertising salesperson. So I'm constantly looking for opportunities to take the tools that we have at our disposal and help our clients, market their business, advertise their business. And Scott and I have been, we've done some business in the past, helping him promote his events that he's had going on, but it's been pretty much traditional, radio commercial type stuff. And, through the course of our evolving relationship over time, it became obvious that this is a pretty deep topic of what he's trying to accomplish. And, a 15, 30, 60-second radio commercial makes it very hard to articulate the real message. So through the course of our conversation, it started coming into my mind that maybe we needed more of a long-form format for him where we had an opportunity to really explain some of the challenges that veterans have and what their organization does. And so we decided that maybe a radio show would be the right way to do it. And that would be something, too, that he could take and offer back as value to their corporate sponsors who are involved.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how it started.
Yeah. So before we go to Scott to kind of announce the title and when we're starting everything, one of the things to think about how marketing has changed, Ed said radio show. The goal is not to make a radio show. The goal is to make a radio show, a podcast, a video cast, short form audio, short form radio, to make something that can go out. As good as the radio is for discovery, the method of the radio reaching people is limited. So now it's a podcast that will go. Now people will fall on it. Now it's set for SEO, so people searching for it will find it based on keywords. One of the most amazing things of the world is it's expanded so far that you could think just because we're in Atlanta, we're reaching Atlantans, you could reach someone in another part of the world that has, it is amazing how far. So the radio show is what forces Scott to get his butt up here and put 45 minutes of content down. But what it really is a content play where you're organizing yourself to one medium with a plan on going multiple places. This will become a radio show, a podcast, a long-form video, short-form video. It will be all these things because everyone wants to consume differently. We can't assume that a Vietnam vet that's pushing up on the latter part of his life is going to speak the same language as a 19-year-old thinking of joining the military. So one of the things about radio and one of the things that has been unfortunately promoted the wrong way is radio is the start of it. Radio is the discovery mechanism because there's still thousands of hundreds of millions of people every day that are turning on their radio station, right? No one turns on Spotify and says, play something random. They're hearing what they want to hear. Radio is one of the few mechanisms that's left for this discovery mechanism. So I just wanted to elaborate that while radio show, I'm excited, and I think the part that I'm here most excited to help with my time is how do we expand this to make sure it's getting in the right people's thing. And luckily with my experience with this show and what I've learned of how to do it, there's always best practices that can always be translated to other fields. Marketing, charity, what we're talking about, these things are very similar things, right? We're talking about how to reach people with the message the right way. So, Scott, with that being said, talk a little bit about the show, when we're launching, what we're titling it, what you hope to get out of it, and what listeners can expect from when they listen.
Yep. Well, first of all, we're very appreciative of the Atlanta Braves organization, the Atlanta Braves Foundation, because they came at us just at the right time. We were looking for a new place to build upon, and you called me Mr. Serendipity because I'm not smart enough to call the Braves and ask them to help me move into the Battery. They were looking for impact in the veteran space.
And if you had asked them, I bet you they would have said no. It doesn't work that way. It never works that way.
It never works that way. They saw the good work we were doing, and they had come, Danielle Badesi, who runs the foundation, who's quite an innovator. She was like, we have some funding coming in, and we'd like to move you into the Battery. My thank you back to them a year later was I did a presentation to the executive leadership and showed them the impact we were making, because I want to show them you didn't do this just to put a press release out, but we're changing lives. And when I did that, the question came back, what can we do now as an organization to really make this thing go? And it was all about awareness and branding and getting the word out so someone in the rural parts of Georgia or Braves country would hear the word of hope, the word of success that veterans are having, or learn about stuff that they weren't paying attention to. Because I don't want to break any marketing hearts out there, but email and some of the PDFs that we get sent out that go directly to spam, the VA wonders why people aren't responding back to all the messaging that's going out through email. It's because we don't read it, we delete it. I get 87 emails an hour. I don't have time to read newsletters that are coming out about, so.
I also think it's a trust thing. You remember you said that they don't trust them. They don't trust the VA. One of the qualities of radio, especially you've been growing up listening to these stations, is that trust is still there. Nobody trusts social media. People barely trust the news. They don't trust the radio is one of the last
with good reason.
With good reason. And I don't want to play that game, but I'm just saying that trust is important, right? Are you going to read an article from an institution that has let you down? You're going to spend your time because they can't get you with the right messaging? There's no chance it's going to happen.
That's right.
The other thing that I want to say briefly is that one of the things that you said you did a really good job of, data visualization.
Yes.
So most people, I'm sorry, and I want to let marketing people down, anecdotal evidence is worthless. Okay? It's crap.
Absolutely.
No one needs your anecdotal evidence. You need data to prove a point, and I don't need raw data. No one wants to hear that. Tell a story with data. Show the benefit you're making, because when you can make these things tangible, you're going to get long-term fans.
Right.
It's not about anymore, look at this picture of this child we helped. Let me show you the data behind what really happened, the numbers, and what your resources are doing for this. That's how you're going to succeed in your future. So go back. Let's finish up talking about the show.
Yeah. And in the consulting business, we used to call that evidence. So people want evidence that what you're doing is actually producing, you're tracking it, you're managing it, and you're making corrections when you see things going off course. And if you don't have that analytics, that visualization, you can't do it. So the thing that really began to get in my craw is there's 700,000+ veterans in the state of Georgia, and I bet you we don't even touch 1% of them or 0.5% of them.
Yeah, that's also exciting. You from the corporate world. That's called opportunity with a big O.
And the only way to get there was marketing, but it wasn't going to happen through newsletters and email. We had to get the words out to the people so that they could hear from people they trusted.
That's the empowerment, right?
That's the empowerment. So the vision, and unfortunately I took Ed along for the ride. I have visions, but don't really come to fruition for maybe 2 to 3 years. But people who have started businesses understand that it's a process of moving forward and stepping way back, and then it's a continuous process.
But you've also honed those instincts of corporate America, right? Because timing is everything.
That's what I fell back on. And unless we had certain relationships built with the VA, certain relationships and credibility with the DOD,
it's all in vain.
If we did not capture the imagination and the desire of corporations to come work with us, I could put on a show after show, but it's like, yes, I'm spending money into the abyss. Now that we've built to a certain level of credibility and formability of we're sustaining now across in capacity building across the whole state of Georgia. This show is broken down into 3 segments.
Go.
It's called the Warrior Alliance Broadcast Network. So we are networking in 3 shows. First of all, the Warrior Alliance Spotlight. That's where we're bringing our partner network, all of our service providers who do everything in legal assistance, in housing, employment, education, networking, family events, healthcare, benefits, all these different areas of services. We're bringing those individuals on the show to build awareness to people across the world of what is available to them for free. Now, the second show is called Success After Service. These are veterans of all walks of life. Some of them have come to us with their filthy rags. Some of them have come to us with their medals of valor. We treat them all the same. They all have a unique story. Some of it's rags to riches. Some of it's, I just needed a plug here, but now I'm making a huge impact on my community. We're bringing all kinds of diversity and different thoughts and avenues, because veterans, there's no single path to success. It is your own path that you have to structure. We're building that content so you can align yourself with somebody's story. We're actually letting Marines on the show with Army people and Navy. So you talk about diversity. But then the last part of the show is called Front and Center. That's where corporations are coming in. There's things in corporations, not things. They're groups, and they're groups called employee resource groups. And there's business resource groups. These are veterans that have come into corporate America and have built organizations to support veterans coming on so they can help onboard them, train them, be peer group support, and help them with their career path. So we're bringing our corporate partners on the show. So veterans coming out, they think if you go to work at the Orange Apron Company, that you're going to be working at the hardware store. But there's a million jobs in that company that have nothing to do with working retail, right? Working with the Atlanta Braves. There's hundreds of jobs that have nothing to do with baseball, right? And so every company has that. But veterans are never explained what is behind the curtain of these companies. Why would I work at Chick-fil-A? I don't want to work in the store. They have corporate, they have their own transportation. So we're bringing that to the 3rd segment so that veterans can hear about all the career pathways that are available to them. And not only that, how to actually connect with those companies through the Warrior Alliance.
That's it. And my favorite part of what you just said, most times you're telling people to put their money where their mouth is. In this case, you're telling people to put their mouth where their money is, right? These companies are throwing money at these things left and right, but how much are they really engaging and showing the opportunities that exist, right? Giving $10,000 to an organization is nowhere near as good as placing 15 veterans within your organization because you've empowered them to find those pathways forward. Right. And I think we have to get better as a group at it. So Ed, why don't you close us out? Tell us when the show will be running, when people can listen, and then we'll rock and roll from there.
Saturdays at 1.
I'm trying to remember. Saturdays at 1 o'clock.
Starting June 1st, or we starting when we starting?
We're starting on June 1st.
Beautiful.
That's exactly right.
That's perfect. So this will be airing the weekend before, and we'll be ready to go. And
there we will be building a content library that will be available to people. So if they miss the show, they'll be able to go back and re-listen to it.
Yeah. I love it. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much. Scott, thank you for what you do and what you bring to the table and how you think about it. It's unique and it's refreshing, and I wish you much good luck. Ed, thank you for joining us. Good luck to Blaze. And you've been listening to The Marketing Madmen on Extra 106.3, and we'll catch you next week.